Hey guys, I've had a ton of requests lately for some sort of an equipment tour. I've got a little bit of downtime this evening, so I'm just gonna kind of walk around the farm and give you guys an idea about what we got going on currently with our current equipment line. First up, our 8260R John Deere. This is a 2000, either an 11 or a 12. It's got currently 1,800 hours on it. You guys haven't seen it in action a whole lot because we picked up that 8360 RT, and that's kind of replaced a lot of the jobs that this tractor does. We still use this thing a fair amount, but just not as much as we used to, especially when it comes to the 1348 grain cart. This 8260 just doesn't quite have enough power to pull that heavy cart around. We picked that cart up at an auction sale. We used to have a 946, whatever Parker's number is. And that was a lot lighter, a lot smaller, didn't carry as many bushels. This tractor handled it just fine. But with that big heavy cart behind here, that 8360 does a lot better job. This tractor does not have the IVT transmission, and it does not have the ILS front end. Nonetheless, it is a nice clean tractor. I like this tractor quite a bit, but we're kind of in limbo with it. We just don't really have a lot of good fits for it around the farm right now because we got that 8360. So I wouldn't be surprised to see us trade this for something in the near future, but which way we're gonna go with that, I'm not really sure. We could use maybe a 7000 series tractor, maybe to replace this and that 6410 that we'll get to in a few minutes here. Next up, we'll head over here to the 9650 combine. This is actually a 1999. I'll climb up here and see what it's got for hours. We've owned this tractor since 2012. We own it just as a second machine for taking out our soybeans. Around here it works well to use two machines and get the soybeans out as quickly as we can so that we can get moved on to corn. Because as you saw last fall, a lot of the time in our area, if we don't get the corn out real quick, the weather can turn on us. We end up with snow on the corn or a lot of wind on the corn with brittle stalks, and that's no good. So a lot of guys around here will run two different combines on their beans. Some guys will run two on corn, but it gets pretty tough to keep up with high bushel corn. It gets tough to keep up with trucks and grain dryers and all that, because most of the time we've got to run our grain dryer. We're far enough north where a lot of our corn doesn't dry down all the way in the fall. Turn the key on here and see what we got for hours on this. We're looking at just about 1,700 separator hours, just about 2,600 engine hours. For those who don't know, the separator is what we call the back of the machine, I guess. That is the threshing part of the combine. That's what does the action and does the work. The 2,600 on the engine is obvious. That's how many hours the engine's been running. It always amazes me to look at the hour difference between the two and see how many hours a guy puts on a combine without actually combining. I'll show you guys from up here. These are our headers. We've got a John Deere 608C chopping head. This is what we combine all of our corn with. It is maybe in the plans to get a 12-row head sometime in the near future. The reason we don't have a 12-row head is because with 200 bushel corn and our 9870 that we harvest the corn with, you can pretty much drive as fast as you want to anyway, and we can only run 3 trucks to try and keep up to that machine. And with our grain dryer always running and the grain bin holding about 12,000 bushels of corn, we always catch up to ourselves anyway. So we figure if we got a 12-row head, we're gonna end up needing maybe another truck, maybe a larger holding tank in front of our grain dryer, maybe a bigger dryer. You know, I'm not sure, but it is maybe in the short-term plans to get a 12-row header at this point. As far as the bean headers go, these are both 635F platform headers. We don't run a draper belt header at all. We've got these two identical heads here. These are 35 feet wide. The reason we don't have a draper belt is pretty simple. They're expensive. So we're kind of, we're happy with these heads for now. They do a pretty good job. We have run the draper belts. We have liked them. They do a really nice job, but they're just so expensive. So for right now, these two heads do pretty good work for us. They're pretty simple. Maintenance isn't too bad on these. Go through them, you know, spend a few hours on them every year, and they're pretty trouble-free. Knock on wood. Or John Deere plastic. Okay, over here is our 9870. This has got 710 metric duals on it, and it's got the rear wheel drive. So when we're combining beans, this one always gets stuck with the tough jobs because it's the one that'll go through mud. That one's got a little bit smaller tires on it. I guess I call them pizza cutters. Compared to this thing will float through the mud like you wouldn't believe compared to that. And I think we get as much out of the large duals on this as we do out of the rear wheel drive. Between the two, this thing will conquer just about anything. It's pretty awesome. The reason we don't have tracks on it is pretty simple. They're expensive. They're really expensive. And we're happy with our duals. They turn good. They don't seem to ridge much. We just, we're happy enough with the duals that we've pretty much decided we don't need to be spending money on tracks. But if we get a really, really wet harvest at some point, you know, that could change our minds. So we'll climb in here. It's a little bit dark in this shed. This is a 2011. The reason we don't have an S-Series combine, again, pretty simple, they're expensive. This is a larger machine. The 9870 had a little bit bigger engine than the 9770. It'll eat corn pretty quickly. It's been good for us. We haven't had problems with it. You guys saw the spindle that broke off last fall. That isn't actually even a Deere part, and it was just the bolts that sheared. It actually didn't take that much to fix. It really wasn't a big break at all. Those guys got it up and going. Wasn't a super critical deal. It didn't wreck a whole ton of stuff. But the S-Series, we have heard of some problems with those, or some more common troubles with them anyway. Certainly, I would think that at some point we'll probably look into getting an S-Series combine, or you know, something different. You've got to upgrade your equipment. You got to maintain the integrity of your equipment line. But I'll start the key up here and see if I can remember how to check the engine hours on this one. This one's a little bit different. That'd be the RPMs. If I remember right, the engine hours on this one are down here. Staring at this screen makes me want to go combining. 1600 engine hours and right at 1200 separator hours. Again, 400 hours difference between the engine and separator. Not as wide as that other machine, but that's because it's lower hours. Don't quote me on this, I'm not 100% certain, but I believe it's right around 300, maybe 350 bushels that'll fit inside the hopper of this thing. We don't have a fancy seed tender box. This is what we got. We got this old top kick truck with this old tender box on it. Works for us, does the job. 2/3 of our fields are right here at home anyway, so we actually usually just bring the planter right into the yard and fill it up there. For the fields that are farther away, this thing does the job right now, and it's paid for. On to the Minneapolis Moline. This is a 1971 G750. This is a fairly rare tractor. This was built during the phase where Minneapolis Moline was switching over to Oliver. This is basically an Oliver 1700 painted yellow, but the fact that it's actually a Minneapolis Moline makes it a pretty rare tractor. I couldn't tell you exactly how many of these are out there. Big Tractor Power can tell you exactly what there are. I know he told me about that when I met with him down in Kentucky. This has got a Westendorf Loader on it. Dad did use that for a lot of silage stuff back in the day when he fed a lot of cattle. He also used this tractor to plant corn and soybeans in the early through mid 80s. We still use it on the farm just about every day right now. It still purrs like a kitten at a milk pail. Told ya. Degelman 7200 rock picker. This thing is 6 feet wide. You guys saw me use that in a video not too long ago. For the few of you who told me that these machines are slow and worthless, why don't you come deal with some of our rocks before we pick the fields. Over here is the 4830 John Deere sprayer. This is a 2014 with about 850 hours on it. We run 30-inch rows, so we've got dual 420s on it instead of 380s. We like the wider tire just because they don't cut in quite so bad, and with our wider rows, we don't have to worry about needing to straddle the beans and the corn so much. So we've got that extra room, so we went with the wider tire. The reason again that we run the duals is because we like to straddle the rows, run right down the rows instead of running things over. So it's much easier and much cheaper to run the duals instead of buying big 600 or 800 metrics and running the big floater tires. This is a lot cheaper and a lot easier. We really like these 420s. They don't cut in like the 380s do, because those 380s, when you get heavy soils out here, they just cut in nice and deep like. They leave those ruts all year long, and then you end up having to combine beans with ruts. And that doesn't work very good because you can't keep the platform heads on the ground very well in the ruts. So that's the reason we put the bigger tires on here. That's the reason we've got the duals on it. This has a 100-foot boom. It holds 1,000 gallons, and it's big and green and tall. We didn't build this trailer, but this is our spray trailer. We've got 3 1,500-gallon water tanks in here. So we've got about 4,500 gallons of water that we can hold. It's all plumbed in. Over to here, you can see where we got the banjo plumbing going on. And as far as the chemicals here, we've got our chemical totes. We plumb them so that they go directly into the water supply here, into the water line. So after the water comes from back here, we can open up this chemical. It'll mix, go through here. This is for obviously all of our common chemicals. We've got the inductor here for the chemicals that we use a lot smaller dosage of. The pump is back here. It comes out, feeds through this hose, and the hose connects right here. Pretty simple. For most of our common chemicals, we never have to actually touch any of the chemicals. Open, close the valves. Passing by here, this is our 2004 Kenworth W900. This one actually has a Cummins in it, which I don't like. We really like our Cat engines around here. Our red trucks have C15s in them. They got a lot more power than this thing, but it's a sweet looking rig. I love W900s. Down here we've got our 9560 RT. This is a 2013 with 1,600 hours on it. It's got 25-inch wide belts. The reason it's got 25s is because that's what it had. They make up, actually, this thing might have 30-inch belts. It's got 30-inch belts instead of the 36. That's what it had on it, so that's what we took. We weren't gonna put bigger belts on it. I guess the internal guts, the wheels inside here are the same size anyway. So we just took what it had, went with these 30-inch belts. There's no rhyme or reason to that. It's just what it had on it. So this has got 560 engine horse. I just looked it up. It's got 433 horsepower at the drawbar. Common uses for this thing, obviously we pull this 2210 field cultivator. This is a 55 foot wide field cultivator. That's pretty much this thing's main job in the spring. In the fall, we pull what we call a deep bander with it. We've got a 1710 chisel plow with some fertilizer, with a fertilizer cart attachment behind it. I'll get to that in a minute here. Here we've got a 3710 10 bottom John Deere Maul board plow. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, we bought this thing for a heck of a deal on an auction about 1.5 years ago. We pulled it home with the pickup and unhooked it, and it has never moved from this spot since. We have not used this plow yet. We just didn't have a fit for it last year. A lot of guys, almost nobody uses Maulboard plows around us anymore. We have a lot of problems with rocks with these plows, but some of the new ones I think should be a little bit better. Our main reason for wanting it is so that if we decide to plant corn on corn, we like to flip that residue over and really bury it so we get a nice black soil the next year when we're planting our corn. We did have one field of corn on corn this year, but we didn't plan on that until we were already into planting. So last fall, we just never used this thing. Dagelman 7645 land roller, 45 feet wide. Tnt 40-foot grain trailers. This is what all of our trailers are. They're all Tnt 40-footers. Gail 5640 skid steer. It's got a lot of hours on it. It's coming up on 2,900. We use it a lot for seed boxes, a lot for odd jobs. We got a lot of different attachments for it. So we use this thing around the farm every day too, but it doesn't really have any specific jobs. The big one is loading the seed totes in and out. It's about a size too small for all of our 40 bushel seed totes, 40 to 50 unit seed totes. Some of the heavier ones are a little too heavy for this machine, so the next one we get is gonna be a size bigger. The 8360 RT, this is a 2013 360 engine horse. I couldn't tell you what that is at the drawbar. It's got to be in the high 2s. This is the tractor that has 25-inch wide belts. We actually ran one that had 18-inch belts on it before we bought this one, a couple years before we bought this one. Personally, I like the 18-inch belts better with our 30-inch rows because they don't leave any tracks that cause any of these to chatter at all. However, the 25-inch belts, they do float a little bit better, and when we were looking for a tractor, this tractor was the right tractor at the right price for us, and it had the 25-inch belts, so that's what we've got here. Walk up here, show you guys the inside. Basically, the same as all the other newer Deere tractors that we've got. This one Does have the IVT transmission. I love that about this tractor. I love this transmission. It's so smooth. It rides nice. The only thing I don't like is it calibrates all the time, which isn't really a problem as long as I let it calibrate when it wants to. Every once in a while. It doesn't need to do it constantly. This is our 1770 Nt Planter. It's all 30-inch rows on it. We don't have the row units in between that come down to plant beans in 15-inch rows. The reason we plant beans in 30-inch rows is because we never have seen enough of a yield advantage to justify owning that second planter to put in 15-inch rows. Each of the hoppers up top hold about 50 units of seed. Depending on seed size, it can get a little bit tight to get all of that seed in there. Most of the time it's not a problem, but on some of the big seed, it gets a little bit tight. Also, this thing is 60 feet wide, so with the 30-inch rows, it's a 24-row planter. We've got the tracks on it. These are from Suki, however you say it, Susi tracks. I believe the footprint on them is 5 feet long and 12 feet wide. We love these tracks. We could not be happier with these tracks when compared to the tires that this thing came with. These tracks carry that weight so well, they ride so smooth, and they actually ridge up less when you're turning on the ends than the tires do. This is our old Chevy service truck. We don't have a big fancy service truck. Most of our fields, like I say, are pretty close to home. This thing works for us. We've had it for a long time, and it gets the job done for us. If we have major breakdowns, sometimes we'll have to get stuff home here and into the shop. But for us, as close as most of our fields are, this thing does most of the stuff that we need it to do. 2014 GMC Dually. We've actually got a 6-liter in this thing. This is not the Duramax. The reason we got the 6-liter is because we don't have any livestock trailers or any trailers that are actually heavy enough to really need to worry about having that pulling power. So we didn't want to have to deal with the Duramax and the diesel and everything. The 6-liter is enough for us. It is a little bit underpowered sometimes. It would be nice to have a little bit more. I wish they still built the 8.1. That thing would be perfect for us. Z930M lawnmower, Polaris 900 Razor, AC 175 Nipco, Hot Wheels pedal bike number 68, hailing out of Lowry, Minnesota, or is he number 89? This one doesn't get used in the fields much. This is our 100 horsepower John Deere 6410. We use it for a ton of odd jobs. It's got the loader on it, so that is nice for working with just about anything. It's got the quick hitch on it for the 3-point stuff. You've seen me do odd jobs with this before. This thing just kind of runs all over the farm and does whatever we need it to. It will pull the rock picker. The rock picker is a little bit big for it now with that 7200, but it does do the job as long as you're not digging on too big of rocks. This one, the interior is definitely different than some of the bigger and newer ones. Still got a pretty nice cab in it. You can sit in here all day without any complaints. These are our other two trucks. These are both 2004 Kenworth T800s. These things are 2 serial numbers apart. They came from the same kind of truck jockey that's just south of us a few miles here. We actually have had one for probably close to 10 years. The other one we got just a couple of years ago. These things have got Cat C15 motors in them, and they both pull the Tnt 40-foot super hoppers. And finally, hiding down here in the grass with a zillion mosquitoes, we've got our 2730 Deep Ripper. We just got this last fall. If you go back and watch some videos, I actually did one video specifically on this. Compared to the 2700 that we had for many years, this is one heck of a machine. We love it. It's big and it's a little bit heavier, but it does an incredible job. It's just built better. Everything about it is a little bit nicer other than having to be so large. But the tractor pulls it no problem. We put the 9560 RT in front of it and it pulled it like a dream. This is our 2210 Deep Bander. What it is it's a 30-foot chisel plow. Every other shank has a tube on it that bands potash and phosphorus into the soil that come from that cart right there. So they're hooked together. We pull that cart around behind this chisel plow, and what we're able to do is soil test and then write variable rate prescriptions, they call it, to be able to go across the field and have the rate adjust up and down as we go. So the P and the K are on separate prescriptions. So we have a phosphorus prescription and a potassium prescription. It's got electric clutches that adjust the rate of what it's putting down at the time. So the fertilizer gets blown through the fan system, through the tubes and comes out through the shanks here on the chisel plow. Here I'll walk up and show you the tube behind one of the shanks. So this shank right here, this point, goes in nice and deep like, cuts a good V, and the tube here, it blows the P and the K down into this furrow, into this cut. The soil comes back over the top and closes it in there. That way our P and K is down into the ground. We try and get it in there 6 or 7 inches. And that way it's down into the soil where it's gonna bind with the soil. We get the nutrients good and deep, and that way the soil can retain those nutrients better. They're not on top, so they're not gonna be at risk for the wind or the water erosion. We can put anhydrous ammonia on with that, or NH3. What we've found is that we've had better luck doing the NH3 separately. So after we put our P and K down with that, we come back with an NH3 bar and go at an angle to try to disturb those fertilizer bands as little as possible, because when you ban that fertilizer like that, it's a lot more efficient for the plants to use that fertilizer as long as it stays in that band. Well, that's pretty much it for our current equipment line right now. Let me know which things you guys like the best. Also, let me know if you guys have any of the same equipment around your farm. Thanks for watching.